The rain hit my face like tiny needles, each drop colder than the last. I stood outside my daughter's house, watching her silhouette disappear behind custom curtains that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. My shoes squelched with every step as I began the long walk home, my arthritis already protesting in the damp November air. She had no idea that the mansion she'd just sent me away from was built on land I still owned. She had no idea about a lot of things. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I could have called my driver. Could have had Bernard pick me up in the Bentley that sat idle in my garage just 500 feet away, hidden behind a wall of pristine hedges. But I didn't. Instead, I walked through that storm, letting every drop remind me why I'd kept my secret for so long. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come wrapped in rain and regret. The party invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, elegant cream cardstock with gold embossing. Rebecca's housewarming. After 2 years of silence, my daughter was finally reaching out. My hands had trembled as I read it, hope blooming in my chest like flowers after a drought. She wanted me there. Perhaps things could finally heal between us. What a fool I'd been. My name is Patricia Martin, though everyone's called me Pat since. I was knee-high to a grasshopper. 73 years old last August, with hands that have built more than they've destroyed, and eyes that have seen fortunes made and lost. Most folks who meet me now see exactly what I want them to see. A retired school teacher living modestly in Willow Creek, shopping sales at the grocery store, driving a sensible 10-year-old Honda Civic that rattles when it goes over 40. They don't see the empire I built from nothing. They don't know about the patents I hold, the companies I've quietly acquired, or the real estate portfolio that spans 3 states. They certainly don't know about the mansion on Rosewood Drive, purchased through a trust so Byzantine that even my lawyer gets confused sometimes. I've played this role so long that sometimes I almost forget who I really am. But I never forget why I started pretending. Rebecca was born during a blizzard 35 years ago, when I was still young and foolish enough to believe love conquered all. Her father, Daniel, had swept me off my feet with his charm and promises. He was everything I wasn't: sophisticated, educated at fancy schools, from a family whose name opened doors mine couldn't even approach. I was just Pat from the wrong side of town, daughter of a seamstress and a mechanic who died when I was 12. Daniel left before Rebecca's 2nd birthday. Not for another woman or another life, but because I'd had the audacity to succeed. My little cleaning business had exploded into a multi-state operation. The man who'd married beneath him couldn't handle his wife earning more than his trust fund provided. He took our daughter and his bruised ego back to his family's compound in Connecticut, leaving me with visiting rights and a heart that felt like shattered glass. The custody battle was brutal, money talks, and the Morrison family had been having conversations with judges for generations. I got weekends and alternating holidays. The judge, a golf buddy of Daniel's father, suggested I should be grateful for that much. After all, what kind of environment could a working woman provide compared to the Morrison estate? So I made a decision that would define the next 3 decades of my life. If they wanted to paint me as the poor relation, the unfortunate mistake in Daniel's past, then that's exactly what I'd be. I sold my visible assets, restructured everything through shell companies and trusts, and became invisible. Pat Martin, the ambitious entrepreneur, vanished. In her place stood Pat Martin, the humble school teacher who drove sensible cars and lived in a modest house. Every other weekend, I'd pick up Rebecca in that year's carefully chosen used car, wearing clothes from Target instead of Neiman Marcus. We'd eat at diners instead of 5-star restaurants, shop at thrift stores for treasures, and I'd teach her the value of hard work and simple pleasures. I thought I was protecting her from her father's family's materialism. I thought I was teaching her authentic values. What I was really doing was lying to my daughter for 33 years. The early years were magical despite the pretense. Rebecca would run to me at pickup time, her little arms outstretched, calling Mama Pat, because Daniel had insisted she call his new wife Mommy. We'd spend our weekends at the park, the library, the community pool. I taught her to bake. Cookies from scratch, to sew buttons, to appreciate sunsets and butterflies and the sound of rain on windows. She'd tell me about her other life sometimes, about the horses and the private tutors and the vacations to places I pretended I'd never been. I'd listen and smile and say things like, "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," while biting back the urge to tell her about the European factories I owned or the board meetings I attended via phone while she slept. The pretense grew harder as she got older. Teenagers have sharp eyes and sharper questions. "Why don't you ever come to my school events?" she'd ask. "Because your father's family had made it clear I wasn't welcome at prestigious Ashford Academy, not in my Toyota and department store clothes." "Why can't we take a real vacation?" Because real vacations would mean credit cards with my name on them, and those would lead to questions I couldn't answer. I compensated with love, pouring everything I had into those precious weekends. We had our traditions: Saturday morning pancakes shaped like animals, Sunday afternoon walks where we'd make up stories about the people we passed, bedtime talks that stretched until she could barely keep her eyes open. I knew every friend's name, every crush, every fear and dream she was willing to share. The Fishers started showing during her college years. Daniel's family paid for Yale, naturally, and suddenly my daughter was surrounded by people who summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen. She'd come home talking about internships at companies I secretly owned, excitedly describing innovations I'd personally greenlit. The irony was physically painful sometimes. "You wouldn't understand, Mom," became her favorite phrase. She wasn't cruel about it, just matter of fact. How could a public school teacher understand venture capital? How could someone who shopped at discount stores appreciate the nuances of Fashion Week? She started skipping weekends, too busy with networking events and gatherings I couldn't attend. I let her go. What else could I do? Pull back the curtain and reveal 3 decades of deception? Explain that her poor mother could buy and sell her precious Morrison family 10 times over? The truth had grown too large, too complicated. It would destroy everything we'd built, make her question every memory, every lesson, every moment of love I'd given her. After graduation, the distance grew. She took a job at Morrison Industries, fell in love with someone from their world, got married in a ceremony where I sat in the back row like a distant relative. I smiled through it all, playing my part perfectly. The help, the embarrassment. The mother who didn't quite fit. 2 years ago, she cut me off entirely. The catalyst was laughably small. I'd worn the wrong dress to a charity function. Not inappropriate, just wrong. Off the rack when everyone else was in designer. She'd pulled me aside, cheeks flaming, and hissed, "Do you do this on purpose? Do you enjoy humiliating me?" I'd stood there speechless as she continued. "I've tried, Mom. I've really tried. But you refuse to even attempt to fit into my life. It's like you're proud of being less." The word hung between us like a blade. I need some space, some time to figure out if there's a place for you in my world. Those were the last words she'd spoken to me until that invitation arrived. I'd respected her wishes, though it nearly killed me. No calls, no texts, no attempted visits. I threw myself into my work, expanding into emerging markets, developing new technologies, building wealth that felt increasingly meaningless without someone to share it with. The mansion next to hers? I'd bought it through a shell company the week after she'd moved in, just to be close to her. Pathetic? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maybe. But when you've spent your life pretending to be poor while actually being rich, you become an expert at self-deception too. The truth was, I'd painted myself into an impossible corner. Every year that passed made the deception harder to undo. How do you tell your daughter that her entire understanding of her childhood was based on a lie? How do you explain that every sacrifice she thought you made was actually just theater? That the struggling mother she'd been embarrassed by could have solved every problem with a phone call? You don't. You can't. So you continue the charade until it becomes your prison. The night of the party, I'd chosen my outfit carefully. Not too shabby, that would embarrass her. Not too nice, that would raise questions. I settled on a 5-year-old dress from Macy's, respectable but forgettable, paired with shoes that had seen better days but were polished to a shine. I wrapped her gift in paper from the dollar store, though the antique music box inside was worth more than most cars. Bernard had wanted to drive me. "At least let me drop you off around the corner," he'd pleaded. My staff knew about Rebecca, knew about the pretense, though they didn't understand it. How could they? How could anyone understand choosing poverty over truth, isolation over revelation? "I'll drive myself," I'd told him, climbing into the Honda that wheezed and protested every mile. The Bentley, the Mercedes, the vintage Rolls, Royce all stayed safely hidden in the climate-controlled garage of my real home. Pat Martin, retired schoolteacher, didn't own such things. The drive to Rebecca's house took 12 minutes. I'd timed it. 12 minutes from my mansion to hers, though she believed I lived 45 minutes away in a modest suburb. Another lie in an ocean of them. I parked 3 blocks away, not wanting my embarrassing car in her driveway among the BMWs and Teslas. The walk gave me time to prepare, to slip fully into character. Shoulders slightly hunched, pace careful but not too. Slow, smile warm but not too confident. I'd become an actress without ever auditioning for the role, method acting my way through my daughter's life. Her house was blazing with light, every window golden against the November darkness. Cars filled the driveway and lined the street. Through the windows, I could see figures moving, holding champagne flutes, dressed in cocktail attire that made my dress look exactly as outdated as it was. My stomach clenched, but I forced myself forward. She'd invited me. That meant something. It had to. The front door was slightly open, letting music and laughter spill into the night. I knocked anyway, a lifetime of careful manners demanding it. A young woman I didn't recognize answered, her smile freezing slightly when she took in my appearance. "You're here for the party?" she asked, doubt coloring her tone. "I'm Rebecca's mother," I said, watching understanding dawn in her eyes, followed quickly by something that might have been pity. "Oh, of course. Come in. Rebecca's in the main room." She stepped aside, and I entered my daughter's world. The house was stunning. I knew it would be. I'd reviewed the architectural plans when she'd bought it, though she'd never know that. My company had actually held the previous mortgage, another cosmic irony in a life full of them. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over marble floors. Artwork I recognized, some pieces I'd bid on at auction through intermediaries, adorned the walls. It was elegant, sophisticated, everything she'd been raised to value by the Morrisons. I found her holding court in the living room, resplendent in a black dress that probably cost more than the Honda. She was laughing at something a man in an Italian suit was saying, her head thrown back, diamond earrings catching the light. My heart constricted. She looked so much like I had at that age, back when I'd worn similar dresses to similar parties, before I'd chosen to hide. She saw me then, and the laughter died on her lips. The group around her followed her gaze, and I watched their expressions shift as they categorized me. Not one of us. The mother, the embarrassment. I'd seen those looks 1,000 times, but they still cut. "Mom," Rebecca said, crossing to me with the careful steps of someone approaching a potentially dangerous situation. "You came." "You invited me," I said simply, offering the wrapped gift. "Congratulations on the house, sweetheart. It's beautiful." She took the package with the tips of her fingers, as if poverty might be contagious. "Thank you. Let me introduce you to some people. What followed was 45 minutes of excruciating politeness. Rebecca paraded me through groups of her friends and colleagues, each introduction carefully calibrated to minimize damage. This is my mother, Pat. She's a retired teacher. The emphasis on retired always stung, as if my imaginary career was safely in the past, unable to contaminate her present. I smiled and nodded and made appropriate small talk, even as I recognized half the people there. The CEO of a company I was quietly acquiring, a board member from a nonprofit I funded anonymously, the wife of a senator who'd personally thanked me for campaign contributions he'd never know came from the woman he was now looking through. The breaking point came when someone asked about my retirement. "It must be nice," the woman said, her tone suggesting anything but having all that. "Free time now. Rebecca's told us you live quite a distance away. Do you travel much?" Before I could answer, Rebecca interjected. "Mom's not really the traveling type. She's more comfortable staying close to home. Familiar surroundings, you know." The condescension in her voice was new. Or maybe I'd just been too hopeful to hear it before. I was being managed, handled, like a problem to be contained. The rage that bubbled up surprised me with its intensity. Not at them, these people who saw only what I'd trained them to see, but at myself for creating this elaborate prison, for sacrificing truth for a principle my daughter had never asked me to uphold. "Actually," I began, then stopped. What was the point? 3 decades of lies couldn't be undone at a cocktail party. "You're right, I do prefer familiar surroundings." Rebecca's relief was palpable. Crisis averted, mother contained. The conversation moved on to safer topics, and I excused myself to find the restroom, needing a moment to compose myself. The house was even more impressive beyond the public spaces. I wandered a bit, noting the details: heated floors, smart home technology, a kitchen that would make professional chefs weep. Everything top of the line, everything perfect. In her study, I glimpsed financial documents on her desk and had to suppress a bitter laugh. She was leveraged to the hilt, the house mortgaged at a rate that made me wince. If she only knew that I held the note, that I could erase her debt with a single phone call. But she didn't know, because I'd made sure she couldn't know. When I returned to the party, something had shifted. Rebecca stood near the bar with a group of women her age, and their body language screamed gossip. I heard my name and froze just out of sight. "I don't know how you stand it," one of them was saying. "If my mother dressed like that, I'd die." "You have no idea," Rebecca replied, and the whine in her voice was evident. "Every family event, every important moment, there she is, looking like she raided a clearance rack. Do you know she drove here in a car that's probably worth less than my monthly wine budget?" They laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Can't you buy her something decent?" another woman suggested. My mother-in-law was the same way until Richard took her. Shopping. "I've tried," Rebecca said. "She returns everything, says it's too much. I think she does it to spite me, honestly. Like she's proud of being an embarrassment." "Maybe she's just jealous," the first woman offered. "It can't be easy seeing your daughter succeed when haven't." "Maybe," Rebecca agreed. "Sometimes I think she resents me for having what she couldn't give me. Like it's my fault Dad's family had money and she didn't." I must have made a sound because they all turned. Rebecca's face went white, then red. The other women scattered like startled birds, suddenly remembering urgent conversations elsewhere. "Mom," she said. "I didn't. How long were you?" "Long enough," I said quietly. The gift I'd brought sat unopened on a side table. I picked it up, suddenly needing something to do with my hands. "I should go." "Don't be dramatic," she snapped, then caught herself. "I mean, we were just talking. You know how these things are." "Yes," I said. "I know exactly how these things are." Something in my tone made her step back. For just a moment, I let the mask slip. Let her see a flash of the woman who'd built an empire, who'd crushed competitors and made fortunes. She blinked, confused, and I quickly looked away. "Enjoy your party," I said, heading for the door. "The house really is lovely." "Mom, wait." She followed me, heels clicking on marble. "Let me at least call you a cab. It's starting to rain." I looked outside. Indeed, the November sky had opened up, releasing a steady downpour that was already forming puddles on her pristine walkway. "I'll be fine," I said. "Don't be ridiculous. It's pouring. You can't walk to your car in this." "I parked a few blocks away," I admitted, watching her face tighten with fresh embarrassment. "Of course you did," she muttered, then louder. "Just wait inside until it passes, or let me drive you to your car at least." "In front of your guests?" The words came out sharper than intended. "Wouldn't want to embarrass you further." Her face flushed. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I was so tired suddenly, tired of pretending, tired of smiling, tired of being less when I was so much more. "Go back to your party, Rebecca. Your real friends are waiting." I stepped into the rain before she could respond. It was cold, shockingly so, but almost welcome after the stifling atmosphere inside. I heard her call after me once, but when I didn't turn, she retreated into her golden house and shut the door. The rain intensified as I walked, soaking through my coat in minutes. My shoes, already worn, quickly became waterlogged. The arthritis in my knees, which I'd been ignoring all evening, flared with each step. 3 blocks had never seemed so far. By the time I reached the Honda, I was drenched. My hands shook as I fumbled for keys, water streaming down my face. The car, temperamental in the best of weather, chose that moment to be difficult. The engine turned over once, twice, then died. I sat there in the dark, rain drumming on the roof, and laughed. It was that or cry, and I'd done enough crying over the years. On the 3rd try, the engine caught. I drove slowly, carefully, not toward the modest apartment Rebecca believed I lived in, but toward my real home. The gates opened automatically as I approached, recognizing the car despite its humble appearance. The security guard, if he was, surprised to see me arriving drenched and disheveled, didn't show it. The garage was warm and welcoming. I parked the Honda between the Bentley and the Mercedes, its shabby normalcy almost comic in such company. Bernard appeared before I'd even turned off the engine, holding a towel and wearing an expression of carefully controlled concern. "Shall I draw you a bath, ma'am?" he asked, as if finding me soaked to the skin was perfectly ordinary. "Please," I said, accepting the towel gratefully. "And perhaps some tea." "Of course. The usual?" "The usual." He hesitated, then added quietly, "The young lady called. From next door. She seemed concerned." I paused in toweling my hair. "Rebecca called here?" "She called your cell, ma'am. Multiple times. When you didn't answer, she somehow found this number. I told her I was house-sitting for the owner who was traveling. She asked me to have you call if I heard from you." Of course. Even in concern, she didn't know she was calling her mother's house. The irony was perfect in its cruelty. "Thank you, Bernard. I'll handle it." He nodded and disappeared to prepare my bath. I stood in my garage, water still dripping from my ruined dress, surrounded by cars worth more than most people's houses, and wondered how I'd let it get this far. The elaborate deception that had started as protection had become a labyrinth with no exit. I looked through the garage window toward Rebecca's house. Every light was still on, the party continuing despite the rain, or perhaps because of it. There was nothing like drama to make an evening memorable. I wondered what story she was telling now. The poor mother who'd stormed off into the rain rather than accept help. The prideful woman who couldn't admit she needed assistance. If only she knew the truth. that her mother owned the house next door, that the struggling teacher had enough wealth to buy entire neighborhoods, that every slight she'd delivered, every condescension she'd offered, had been absorbed by a woman who could destroy her financial stability with a single phone call. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Because beneath all the lies and pretense, she was still my daughter. The little girl who'd made me Mother's Day cards from construction paper and glitter, who'd trusted me with her secrets and fears, who'd loved me before she learned to be ashamed of me. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step an effort. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide whether to return her calls, whether to continue the charade, or finally reveal the truth. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the consequences of decades of deception. But tonight, I just wanted to wash away the rain and the humiliation and the terrible weight of being unseen in plain sight. Tonight, I wanted to stop being Pat Martin, the retired teacher, and just be Patricia Martin, the woman who'd built an empire and lost a daughter in the process. The bath was perfect, hot enough to ease the ache in my joints and scented with lavender to calm my racing thoughts. I sank into it gratefully, letting the water embrace me the way my daughter couldn't. Outside, the rain continued to fall, drumming, against windows that looked out on a world that had no idea who I really was, just like Rebecca. The next morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through rain-washed windows. I woke in my emperor-sized bed, surrounded by Egyptian cotton sheets that Rebecca would never believe her poor mother could afford. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd slept better in my soaked clothes in the Honda than I did now in all this luxury. My phone showed 17 missed calls, 12 from Rebecca, 5 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably her friends, enlisted to help locate the wayward mother who'd vanished into the storm. I listened to the first voicemail, then deleted the rest unheard. Her voice had carried the same tone she used when dealing with difficult vendors at work. Frustrated, inconvenienced, but ultimately obligated to resolve the situation. Bernard had laid out my breakfast in the solarium, as he did every morning. Fresh fruit, artisanal bread, preserves from a small farm in Vermont I'd invested in years ago. The Wall Street Journal sat folded beside my plate, though I already knew what it would say. The merger I'd orchestrated through shell companies had gone through. Another few million added to accounts Rebecca didn't know existed. I was reaching for my coffee when Margaret, my housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. Her usually composed face showed signs of distress. "Ma'am, there's a situation," she said carefully. "The neighbor is at the gate." My hand stilled. "Rebecca?" "Yes, ma'am. She's quite insistent about speaking to the owner. I told her you were traveling, as per your instructions, but she won't leave. She says it's about an elderly woman who might be in danger." Of course. My daughter playing the concerned citizen while really trying to track down her embarrassing mother. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate calm. What exactly did she say? Margaret consulted the tablet she carried for household management. She said her mother left her house in the storm last night and never made it home. She's checking with all the neighbors to see if anyone saw anything. She seems... Margaret paused, choosing her words carefully. Genuinely distressed. Through the solarium's glass walls, I could see the gate at the end of my drive. Rebecca's silver Tesla waited there, a gleaming reminder of the life she'd built without me. Or rather, the life she thought she'd built without me. If she only knew how many of her opportunities had been quietly orchestrated, how many doors had opened because Patricia Martin had made a call or pulled a string. "Tell her the owner is in Tokyo," I said finally, "but that you'll check the security footage and call if anything turns up." Margaret nodded and retreated. I watched through the windows as she walked down the drive, her professional demeanor never wavering. The conversation was brief. Rebecca gestured animatedly, clearly frustrated, but eventually drove away. Not toward her house, I noticed, but in the direction of my supposed apartment. She'd find nothing there, of course. The building manager, well compensated for his discretion, would tell her that Ms. Martin had returned home safely last night and left early this morning for a senior center activity. Another lie in an endless chain of them. I spent the morning in my study, trying to focus on quarterly reports and acquisition proposals. But my mind kept drifting to Rebecca's party, to the words I'd overheard. Each memory was like pressing on a bruise, painful but somehow impossible to resist. The truth was, I'd created this situation. Every choice I'd made, from the initial deception to its decades-long maintenance, had led to this moment. I'd told myself I was protecting her, teaching her values, keeping her grounded. But somewhere along the way, the lie had become bigger than both of us. My phone rang, interrupting my brooding. The caller ID showed Harrison Blackwell, my primary attorney, and one of the few people who knew the full extent of my empire. Patricia. His cultured voice carried a note of concern. I heard about last night. I shouldn't have been surprised. Harrison's network was extensive, and gossip from Rebecca's party would have traveled fast through certain circles. News. Travels quickly, I said. When Patricia Martin walks through a storm rather than accept a ride, people notice, he said dryly, even if they don't realize they're noticing Patricia Martin. They saw what they expected to see, a stubborn old woman too proud to accept help. Is that what you are now? Stubborn and old? I laughed despite myself. Getting older, certainly. The stubborn part's been there all along. Indeed. He paused. You know this can't continue indefinitely. The Rosewood Trust is up for renewal next month. The apartment building holdings need to be restructured. At some point, Rebecca will stumble across something. He was right, of course. The financial web I'd woven was complex, but not impenetrable. As Rebecca rose through the business world, the chances of accidental discovery increased. Just last month, she'd mentioned working on a project that would intersect with one of my companies. I'd had to quietly redirect the initiative to protect my secret. I know, I admitted. But after 35 years, how do you tell someone their entire life has been based on a lie? With words generally, Harrison said, preferably clear ones. You make it sound simple. I make it sound necessary. There's a difference. After we hung up, I wandered through my house, all 12,000 square feet of it. Each room held pieces of the life I'd built in shadow. The art collection that rivaled major museums, the library with first editions Rebecca would have loved, the screening room where I watched her favorite movies alone, imagining different conversations we might have had. In my office, I pulled out a leather journal from a locked drawer. Inside were letters I'd written but never sent, one for each birthday, each milestone, each moment when the truth had almost broken free. Hundreds of pages of words she'd never read, apologies she'd never hear, explanations that grew more complicated with each passing year. The latest entry was from last month, the day I'd seen her promotion announcement in the business section. My daughter, Vice President of Strategic Development at Morrison Industries. The photo had shown her shaking hands with the CEO, unaware that her mother had recommended her for the position through careful, untraceable influence. I'd written, "My darling girl, you earned this, whatever else you might think when the truth comes out. Know that you earned every success through your own brilliance. I just made sure the doors were unlocked. You're the one who walked through them." A sound from outside caught my attention. Rebecca's Tesla was back, this time parked directly in front of my gates. She sat in the driver's seat, staring at my house with an expression I couldn't read from this distance. My phone buzzed with a text. "Mom, I know you're in there. The security guard described the woman he saw last night. Please, just talk to me." My blood chilled. Of course. She'd always been too smart for her own good, or mine. The security guard at the community entrance would have logged my Honda, would have seen me drive toward this house. It wouldn't take much for Rebecca to piece together that the mysterious owner and her missing mother had arrived within minutes of each other. I watched as she got out of her car and approached the intercom. Her finger hovered over the button for a long moment before she pressed it. "This is Rebecca Morrison." Her voice crackled through the speaker in my study. "I need to speak with Patricia Martin. I know she's there. This is about... It's a family emergency." Morrison. She'd used her married name, or rather, her father's name that she'd taken back after her divorce. Another small rejection, another careful distance placed between us. Margaret appeared in my doorway, awaiting instructions. I could send her away, again, maintain the fiction. Or I could end 3 decades of deception with the press of a button. "Ma'am?" Margaret prompted gently. "Let her in," I heard myself say. "Send her to the front study. I'll be down shortly." Margaret's eyes widened. Slightly. She'd never seen me receive anyone in this house as myself, but she nodded and left to execute my wishes. I stood before my mirror, considering what to wear. The designer clothes that filled my closet seemed wrong somehow, but so did the simple outfits I wore as Pat. In the end, I chose middle ground. Well-made but understated, expensive but not ostentatious. I kept the necklace Rebecca had given me for my 60th birthday, a simple gold chain she'd saved for months to afford. One truth among all the lies. The walk to the front study felt both endless and too quick. Through the partially open door, I could see Rebecca standing by the window, her posture rigid with tension. She'd changed from last night's party dress into jeans and a cashmere sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, more like the girl I remembered. I paused in the doorway, watching her take in the room. Her eyes tracked over the built-in bookshelves, the original Monet above the fireplace, the Persian rug that cost more than her car. I saw the exact moment when recognition began to dawn, not of the objects themselves, but of their worth, their authenticity, their implication. "Hello, Rebecca," I said quietly. She spun around, her face a kaleidoscope of emotions. "Mom?" The word came out strangled, uncertain. "What are you? Whose house is this?" "Mine," I said simply. "Would you like to sit down?" "Yours?" She didn't move. "That's impossible. You live in Garden Heights. You drive a Honda. You shop at discount stores. You're a retired teacher." "I do drive a Honda," I conceded. "The rest is more complicated." She sank into one of the leather armchairs, her legs apparently no longer willing to support her. I took the chair across from her, the coffee table between us feeling like an ocean. "I don't understand," she said. "Is this some kind of joke? Are you house-sitting or something?" "No joke, no house-sitting. This is my home. One of them, anyway." "One of them?" Her voice pitched higher. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" I'd imagined this conversation so many times, scripted it 100 different ways, but now, faced with her confusion and growing anger, all my prepared words evaporated. "I own this house," I said. "I bought it through a trust when you moved in next door. I also own the apartment building in Garden Heights where you think I live, along with several other properties. The Honda is real, but there's also a Bentley and a Mercedes in the garage. I was never a teacher. I built a company, several companies actually, starting when you were a baby. I'm worth..." I paused, the number still surreal even to me. Approximately $800 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. Then she laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Right. My mother, who returns birthday gifts because they're too expensive, is secretly a multimillionaire. Did you hit your head in the storm? Should I call a doctor?" I stood and walked to my desk, retrieving a folder I'd had Harrison prepare months ago, hoping I'd never need it. Inside were documents: incorporation papers, bank statements, property deeds, patent registrations, proof of the empire I'd built while pretending to struggle. I handed it to her wordlessly. She flipped through the pages with growing incredulity. her face paling with each revelation. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Menton Industries. That's one of the biggest logistics companies in the country. Blackwood Technical Solutions. They hold defense contracts. These patents." She looked up at me, eyes wide. "Mom, these are your signatures." "All mine," I confirmed. "Built from a single cleaning service that I started when you were 6 months old." But why?" The folder slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the Persian rug. "Why would you lie to me? Why would you pretend to be poor? Why would you let me?" She trailed off, but I knew what she couldn't say.